car, vehicle, things like that. They can be verified, they can be validated by sort of collaborative or corroborating rules and clues and things. So that actually makes them kind of deterministic. But there are also probabilistic identifiers. Oops, into the light. Stay in the light loop. Okay. That is pieces of information that are known with some probability much less than, p equals sort of limit of 1. Often these sort of probabilistic identifiers involve a modifier or levels of certain attributive characteristic. And I'm going to sort of cite one here in a second. So for example, expert C++ programmer. Well, that's an interesting label, but it's really kind of a probabilistic label because there are a couple issues. Issue number one is the identifier is really relational to others in the universe. Because how do you know? Well, there are others that better you. What's really expert? Well, this guy's a lot better than you. Does that make him the expert and you the non-expert? So it makes things a bit fuzzy, makes things more probabilistic. Another issue is it's more difficult to verify and validate a probabilistic kind of identity claim in an environment like the web. Okay? So one interesting thing about these probabilistic identifiers is they often cause a lot of status conflicts in the online communities, in the hacking community. And one of the reasons is people in the hacking community for much of the year communicate by email, communicate by IRC chat, may communicate by phone, but phone's a pretty small bandwidth kind of thing too. And so they don't get a chance to get together and meet face-to-face and work these clues out, exchange information back and forth. And so when you don't do that, these conflicts sort of arise. Who's the leader? Do I know better than this guy, or does that guy know really what he's doing? Where's my position in hierarchy? Can I really say this? Do you think the other guys will say yes? All sorts of processes like that. And they sort of fail because you don't have these face-to-face verbal and nonverbal cues to sort of exchange information back and forth. It's very effective when you're face-to-face. You can work it out very quickly. And that's one reason why conferences like this conference are really very functional in the hacking community, because they allow these kind of face-to-face interactions to occur and validation and exchange of clues, verbal and nonverbal clues, and it's actually a very good thing for the community. It keeps the sort of the lid on things and keeps status conflicts down. Well, unfortunately, there's another meaning to probabilistic identifiers. Guess what, friends? There are other folks out there creating identities for you, if you hadn't already guessed. I'm sure you have. Commercial entities, governmental entities, and military entities are creating databases and digital identities of you in them. That may be not quite so good. I don't know. First of all, I don't have really control of that. It's like, what are they doing? How are they doing it? Where did they get this information? Is the information even correct? I don't know. Now, these probabilistic identifiers that they have in these databases, whether it's commercial or military or government, may be probabilistic or deterministic. Now, unfortunately, well, maybe fortunately, they're not really going to come visit you and say, oh, look, you're male, and you look about 47 years old, and that is a Jeep outside. Okay, we'll write that down. So a lot of the information that's stored in these databases, well, often the nature of these databases is they're like Swiss cheese. That is, there are lots of holes in them. They don't know. They say, well, I got a field here, this person, we think they travel out to the Middle East. That's our variable, and I look on this person, and then data's missing. We don't know. That's bad. Well, these entities don't like holes. Holes don't allow them to do stuff. It's like, I can't make a prediction because I don't know if this person travels to the Middle East a lot. Uh-oh, what do I do? Well, there's an answer. That answer often is, okay, if it's not there, let's model it. Yeah. So data may be missing because it's incomplete because of logistical issues, because they can't collect it. And data may be missing or complete because the concept or variable they're trying to create is abstract. So for example, In the commercial world, they're always looking for high-income people. In the US, there's something called socioeconomic status, or SES, and they look at income, education, occupational status, things like that, and they say, okay, you're a middle-class person, you're an upper-class person, you're a working-class person, and that's how they can create models to do that. Pretty simple statistical models. But if you go around and say, they probably class me as upper middle class. If I look in my wallet, pull my wallet out, there's no card that says, hi, you're upper middle class, welcome. It's a pretty abstract construct. So, but there are lots of other abstract constructs out there besides that. So, for example, what's a terrorist? That's a really good question. So, often this stuff is modeled. And I know I spent about a year on a National Academy Counterterrorism Committee, and so sometimes they have to model stuff. People model stuff. And so they put probabilities on things. What's the probability that this guy is a terrorist? What's the probability that this guy might do something? What's the probability? So there's a lot of holes in the data, and you can model it, and it'll give you a probability. But if there's an 80% chance you're a terrorist, there's a 20% chance you're not. Oops, uh-oh. And it gets worse, because let's imagine that instead of two events, A and B, terrorist, not terrorist, suppose they're like 10. Well, the way these statistical models work in general is they look at the probability. You got 10 probabilities. And oh, look, here's a 0.2 and a 0.1, and a 0.15. And it may turn out that the top probability for you for some certain designation is maybe 0.2 or 0.22, or 22 chances out of 100. Since that's top probability out of all the 10 things, that's what the model's going to say you are. Whoops, that doesn't sound so good. So probabilistic identities are kind of a touchy thing, and they can be a real problem. So, I want to say just a little bit about this. This is one of my favorite harangues. It'll be short. I really like George Herbert Mead. He was a social interactionist, sociologist, and he studied symbolic and created symbolic interactionism in sociology. He had sort of two very cool, interesting concepts, one called the I, one called the me. The me was really the social self. That is, part of your identity really comes, a great deal of it comes from how other people interact with you, what they say to you, how they treat you, things like that. And so you create your identity on how other people behave or interact with you. And secondly, there's the I, which is sort of the novel, or sort of the ego. It's sort of like, okay, well, this is really me, regardless of what other people say. And so we can see that our psychological sense of identity is really not just us or what we think, but it's a lot of what other people think and how we perceive other people perceive us. And I do this because I always like to sort of inject this, computers and machines as social identities. That is, in Mead's theory, it was pretty simple. All you had to do to be a social actor, like a person, for example, was exchange meaningful social symbols. And the meaningful social symbols was a pretty general definition. I've got 15 minutes, good, fab. And so if you carefully study how people interact with machines, you see that the machine and the person are exchanging meaningful symbols. Well, does that mean that the machine is a social actor? Well, I don't know. But you'll notice the way people sort of in the tech and the non-tech world sort of anthropomorphize computers. They have moods. It's being mean. I'm going to beat that machine no matter what. And so, well, machines might actually become sort of social actors. I watched the robotics thing, which was actually pretty cool, on television. Didn't have a chance to get there to see it, the robotics lecture today. And it was interesting. I actually saw the Aibo thing in the speaker's bureau, and she was sort of letting it play around. It was sort of like people were treating it like a dog. Literally, it's like, oh, look, it's sleeping. Oh, look, it's barking. And so that's something I just wanted you to sort of keep in mind in terms of identities might not just be people, but might be machines. So I'm going to start to wrap up so I have just a little bit of time for questions. Our sense of identity is likely to become more and more fragmented as we and others sort of build additional identities for ourselves. Will we be able to adapt without some psychological penalties? We're going to be so fragmented that we have so many identities. Will we just become sort of wispy ghosts in the machine? I don't have a good answer to that yet. It's something that I don't really know. One thing that I thought was really interesting is that maybe someday in the future, meeting face-to-face will be kind of weird. It'll be kind of odd. You do all your shopping online. You do your communication online. You do your work at home online. But meeting someone in the flesh might turn out to be kind of strange. And so that's something to sort of keep in mind, that might happen in the future. And also, one other idea I want to plant is, does social theory about the sense of identity and self, that is social theory, have some implications for the technical arenas, such as identity management systems? That is, can it help go beyond I have something, I know something for authentication, identification? Does a more psychological understanding of identity contribute to identity schemes like Cameron's 7 laws of identity? Things like that, sort of keep in mind and think about. Finally, for those paranoid in the audience, can we outrun entities that attempt to identify us without our knowledge? My sense is that digital technology not only gives others the ability to efficiently construct multiple identities, but at the same time, you're able to sort of create them and shed them faster than some other entity, like a government or a commercial enterprise, can gather them, collect them, aggregate them, analyze them, and figure them out. So hopefully, you can basically run like this, shedding sort of identities as you go behind you, and keep ahead of the sort of the maw that's running after you. Okay, thanks for listening. I'm Dr. Max Kilger. At least I think I'm Dr. Max Kilger. I'm not really sure. Uh-oh, gotta go check? No? Well, no? Okay. So anyway, I'll stop for a second, and I'll hand the microphone off to one of the audio angels or to the first person who wants a question, and away we go.
I have 2 remarks, not a question. You said that a person online can have several identities, one after the other. I think it's even worse. I can have several identities at one time. I can be in a multi-user dungeon environment and simultaneously can be on the IRC, having a different identity. Yes. And the second point is, I think on the internet, every identity is probabilistic, because there is a 50-50 chance that I'm male or female, if I pretend to be male or female. Or you can do it with any other thing.
I think both of the comments are quite true. That online, it's always sort of going to be probabilistic because you don't have those verbal and nonverbal cues. So I'm gonna try see if there are any other questions. Quiet bunch. No. Ah, yes. Okay. Let's. Yeah, you can pass it this way. I can keep this one.
I'm not really sure whether this point you made about this social status problems and somehow the need for face-to-face contact is really true or really exists in all cases, because in some sense, I mean, for example, in order to develop some program, it might not be necessary to get all the additional attributes of another person. Perhaps what the Wikipedia guys are showing up, there might be some example where this is not happening, and nevertheless, it seems to work.
Yeah, I think that's correct to some degree, but I still would agree that your identity is very sort of probabilistic. And for example, what if the code doesn't work?